Hey guys, I'm Captain Foley.
Connor Cockins, and it is Saturday, which means a ship. And not just any ship. Stuart, what are we looking at today?
Today we are going to discover something fantastic.
That's such an old
We're
joke.
going to go on a journey of discovery. And we're going to discoverize something cool. Anyway, we're going to look at Discovery so far. From what we've seen, we've got 9 episodes in, half a season. We got a lot of great images. We've seen a lot of great things from this ship as far as tech-wise goes. And we're going to take a look at it in more detail than we have in the past. Because all that was speculative. Now we kind of know a bunch of stuff. So,
Yes.
let's look at it.
I know that I did a similar folder after episode 1, because we got some great beauties, but I was like, nope, let's wait until we have every view. And we have every view and some other ones. So I thought, now's the time to actually say, what do we think? We've seen it in action 9 episodes in. I know we were always, let's not say a fan of the design, but we could understand it, and we were given the, I guess the biggest thing, we were given the designers and the writers wait and see, and the biggest problem everyone had was the hole in the saucer, and there was a reason, and what's the reason?
I don't know.
Oh, because it spins. Design because spinny.
Yeah. So there's 2 counter-rotating rings in the saucer.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the thing that happens. At least it did. I don't really see it anymore, really.
They don't really focus on it. It's such a non-point.
Yeah.
Like, they never explained how it works with the spore drive. You wouldn't think it would be important.
Yeah, there's been no explanation as to the relation and what this... Yeah, but I would like that at some point. It would be cool.
Yeah, actually, that'd have been really good. My assumption was that kind of it releases spore particles. You know, they need double rotating gravimetric particle charged field thing, and that's part of it. Or that's keeping the gravity inside the ship stable while it was a spinning move, something like that, I was assuming. But it would be nice to... But what do you think of how the ship's been presented? I know that we were all conscious of the problematic length of nacelles. But how have you felt 9 episodes in, many hours, many beauty shots? Maybe not flying shots, but sporing shots and just beauties. What have you thought about her realised?
The engines don't look as long or as cantered in as we saw in the early pictures.
Okay.
Not the early pictures, the latest pictures. Because I remember at San Diego Comic-Con, the pictures they showed, they looked very elongated and they point almost inward. I'm looking at these here. They still has the same kind of feel, but they don't seem as long at all. And the shot directly from the back, they're very straight. They look good. I think I would have preferred shorter, stubbier ones that actually were attached at the back, like we saw with the alpha version of this. I really like that. But this makes it feel much more streamlined. But considering how the spore drive works and how the jump process works, I think the stubbier nacelles would have worked better. Because you don't need that fast look. You know, those fast-looking nacelles kind of imply a forward momentum for an enhanced speed. You don't need that with this. The way it spins and then jumps, stubbier, shorter nacelles would actually be better for that kind of design, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's interesting is that they said this ship was specifically designed around the spore drive technology, which is clear based on the rotation of the rings. But that means, and it's also newer than the Enterprise, the original Cage iteration anyway, the refit, who knows, but the original version. So it's brand new spanking technology. Now, these warp nacelles are hugely longer in proportion than any other engines, based up until the Excelsior, but they proportion those better to the whatever that worked. But it implies this has more advanced warp technology than that. But now obviously they didn't know they were going to perfect the spore drive technology, so you still give it good warp. But is it implying that the coils are still part of the spore drive technology? Like, they still need that extra something in that to help make, maybe the rotation bubble, the rotation creates a forward bubble, and then the back bits generate something at the back to help bring it all together. Maybe it needs to be that long. Maybe it needs to be that far away from the hull to be safe. Something very realistic. Because I always feel that form follows function, and technology says something. And so them being this massively long, we were kind of hoping there'd be prototype engines, so it's inefficient in some ways, or older tech, hence the different facades. but it doesn't seem to be that, because only the spore drive is new, properly new. So I'm wondering why the nacelles. I mean, maybe they're hyper long range nacelles. Maybe they're like nacelles that don't need to be going. Maybe the ones that don't need to be in maintenance. Once every 10 years, so they can keep doing their trials. Maybe something like that. Or there's shielding
Could be
needed for the spore drive theoretically that would damage the coils otherwise. That could be kind of interesting.
It could be. Well, if you go to picture 11, and this interests me in the last episode we saw, you can see the way the outer ring is rotating. You got the arrows there. You also have the big spore drive section in the middle. That would imply to me that a lot of the spore technology is located in that part of the ship.
Yeah.
With the way the nacelles are there, the way they're cantered back, and it's almost like the line of sight for the nacelles is far back so that it doesn't interfere with the spore drive stuff in the middle.
Like the that's really interesting. Like the radiation still emanates.
Yeah.
Oh.
So maybe that's why they're so long and
I like that.
And sleek behind there.
I mean,
it looks from this diagram, which is in engineering, it says spore drive engaged. I noticed this in the last episode. It's got that big red ring. I think that's the main spore drive engineering section. I mean, it still leaves other rooms in that secondary hall, obviously. That could only also be one deck. Who knows? But
we know that the engineering subsystem room they always show is in that exact zone.
Yeah. And then the rings and stuff on the saucer are just the tech that implements the jump. Like the spore drive tells the rings what to do, engages the all the critical components, and then maybe sends the energy out to the rings that causes the spin. I'm not sure, but I think that's what we're talking about with the nacelles being placed farther back. It keeps the line of sight away from the spore drive, and does still have line of sight. Not that we believe in line of sight necessarily.
But in this era we do.
Yes, we should in this era. Absolutely.
Well, if you go to picture 3, the back view, you can see that the line of sight, because it's the warp coil emitters. That's why in Enterprise D, the blue coils, that is the bit that needs line of sight. They're actually very close in, but it's just enough space. In this, it does have very thin coil blue alignments, and it's past. There's a whole chunk early on. So you can imagine, if the entire thing, and we've never seen a coil go all the way up to the back. I guess the Enterprise D, wrapped around, so that's not true, but it does go the entire length, so maybe it gets stronger the further it goes down or such, and it needs extra space to actually create a stable warp field, and you can imagine that all the times they're not using the spore drive, they still need to have a stable warp field, so maybe the only way to make, as I say, the warp field initialize is to have this excessively long field, so it's kind of like, scraping the barrel of the technology to make them both work together.
Yeah, it could also. We also did see a spore jump while at warp, which we called a sporp. You called a sporp. Could it be that the nacelles being back that far generate the warp bubble, but with the technology from the spore drive being up front on the saucer, kind of separates the two a little bit, and so that it can actually do both at the same time? I mean, because we mentioned that in the last one where we kind of talk about that jump and how it's impressive that it can jump while still inside of a warp bubble, because there's distortions going on like crazy when that's going on.
Out of subspace into normal space, another part
and
of the
then
universe.
be still. It can go from warp 5 to dead stop, which is impressive. So maybe that's another reason for the technology being the way it is and being pushed so far back for the engines. Just a theory, just a thought. Could be wrong.
Brilliant.
Likely not, because I'm awesome. But I'm just kidding.
No, that's brilliant. I love that. That really. The problem with this, and we do this all the time, and even Rick Sternbach, who thinks a lot of this stuff through, a lot of the other pieces are just there for window dressing. They're part of the Federation aesthetic, but they're still window dressing. Little components. So we know this design was heavily designed by committee, heavily, to the point that little things were re-engineered very, very regularly. So we are obviously we know this thing exists the way it does. We know it works the way it does. We've now got to make it make sense, because they haven't really explained or gone into any of those details. And I don't think the design implemented that. I don't think there was the thought that, the spore drive has to be far away from the warp drive. But
there will be tech manuals, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of, if the spore drive is so ingrained in the middle, where is the warp core how big is the warp core and where are the power feeds, and is that still safe? I mean, obviously it's safe because it works, but
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing before you said that, and I'm thinking it's probably in the neck section.
yeah.
Because it's quite long and it's quite beefy.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they couldn't have a warp core in there. And feeding back along the leading edge of those wings to the nacelles. Doesn't hit the spore drive that way. Doesn't
That's
hit the spore drive that way.
So that could be an explanation of why the grills are there. Their warp something
Plasma coolant.
Plasma, yeah, they're directly cooling the feeds to try and link. Yeah, that'd be great, because they're a bit of a strange, and we'll go into that in a minute 'cause it's in picture. But I guess is that picture 2? No, well, yeah. I mean, in picture 2 we can see them. I mean, do you think that's what they are? Do you think they're part of the warp system? Do you think they're part of the spore system? I mean, they're very distinct blue grills, and you can see them better in other pictures as well. I mean, what are they?
People have asked that, and yeah, if it is part of the warp feed to the nacelles, it could be for some kind of cooling or whatever, or it could also be part of the spore drive. It could project a field up to the like underneath the saucer where the saucer's been aligned. It's done its thing. It projects this field and then gone. Because they do light up when it spore jumps. I don't know. It could be multiple things. I need to know. I need to find the tech manual.
Yes.
We need to get John Eves on here talking about this if we can.
We do. But then picture 2, we can see obviously it's very familiar to how we thought it was. Interesting self-illumination grid. There's red static lights on the leading edge of the saucer, which has not been done before, and a whole lot of self-illumination, which don't really light anything up particularly well. The refit is pretty damn light. If you put the refit in darkness, it's actually very well lit. But this in darkness, it has some very little spotlights places, but for the most part, it'll still be quite dark. Which is kind of weird. They're always trying to, look like the refit in some ways, but at the same token. Well, and to be fair, the JJ Prize has a lot of little self-illumination bulbs all over the place. Very similar to this. It's kind of very sort of JJ styling. If I was going to pick one. And if you go to picture 4, this is when I think it's just when they stop from a spore jump, and you can see those two blue bulbs, like at very odd angles, because it's rotated. They should be either side, but it's done a whole rotating thing, which is really changes the bulb look, because they're going to keep spinning.
Yeah. And the next picture is when Mud blows up the ship numerous times. You get to see the explosion coming from the shuttle bay area and up. Here we get a closer look at those grills and vents. They're very similar to the refit warp chillers. So it could be, and they're warp chillers. I mean, they're, I think, designed for specifically cooling, venting like plasma. Could be that they do tie in with the feeds for the nacelles. I don't know. It would seem to make sense, and it's a kind of a visual tie-in anyway. Yeah. But who knows? And I got to say, in this picture too, I do love the deflector with the dual prong look. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, we've barely. This is why I put this picture in, to show the deflector, because we basically never see a close with a deflector ever. Because we never really get that close to the ship, except those really close-ups on one specific thing that isn't tech related. Beyond the spinning shot, like there's never like here's a sexy shot of the Bassard. Here's you never get to see internal. But I'm thinking maybe though that the navigational deflector could be the main middle bit, but the spore drive deflector grill, like, it needs unique deflector properties, because guess what, the deflector grid of a normal ship is not designed to cope with everything, instant universe hopping technology. So they need to have the primary deflector to do everything a normal ship would do, and to help with warp, all that good stuff. And these separate grills are dedicated spore drive emitters and field generators and all that stuff. But I think we still like the deflector, even though it's a little bit silly. It does link to obviously the Columbia, and to be fair, it links to everything in Discovery, because almost all the ships have dual prong deflector points.
And I don't think it looks silly. I think it looks awesome.
Well, I mean, it just goes out too far. I just mean it's a very, very sticky outer. It shouldn't be. It should be like a third, if not 2/3 smaller. Is all. I mean, you could make. Oh, okay, cool.
I can do that,
Yeah, please do. Next picture 5. You can see a great back view.
That's beautiful.
Wow, that's interesting, because we see If we go back to picture 3 for a second, we know what the impulse engines look like, and they're sort of hexagonal chunks in a thing. But in picture 5, this is when they've just warped out, and those impulse engines are blaring. Like that is raw power. So I guess they were maybe they're using reverse thrust while in sport.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. Because yeah. Good call. No, it's a beautiful shot. That's a great wallpaper right there.
Yeah, and everything. I've lit everything up, guys, to enhance what you can see a little bit. But as you know, it's very simple detailing. Like the hull, it's some nice little grooves on the top of the engines, but very, very simple. There's little plates at the back. I do kind of like that it's got sticking outing plates on the top of the Discovery. I'm not sure what they do. They're probably like armor for those warp feeds, maybe, because that would kind of make sense to double up. I mean, obviously it's more of an obvious target, but so is the impulse drive, so is the warp engine, so is Deflector. I mean, everything's an open target. But if you had the extra armor, it would kind of help. And okay, if that was the length of nacelles, you know, it's a bit of a wide-angle shot. It doesn't look as wide. It doesn't look as long as it is. But if that was the length of the ship, the nacelles, I mean, would that be a better length? Do you think?
I would think so. Yeah. They just stretch a little too far and get a little too pointy for my liking, especially for this era. If it was the future, yeah, I would be more inclined, because like the Enterprise J, it's got the little spindly attachment points for the struts and the nacelles, right?
Yeah.
Just for the era, this, I think it gets a little bit too thin near the back of the nacelles, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to have a personal opinion, even though everybody screams at me for it.
That's what this show is. Next picture 6, is another great side view, and it shows actually how big and boxy that bottom part is. Maybe that's all like the cargo areas, the areas that they... I mean, we know that that's where Lorca's menagerie is. Maybe that's the functional area of the non-spore drive zones. They had to, like, you know, they built the flat top bit with the impulse drivers. That's the technology of the ship, and the bottom bit is we need, you know, room for everything else. Because they say they can do more science than any ship in the fleet. Where's the space? We know the Sorcerer is almost entirely spore drive tech. We know that the lowest ranks have to share bunks, and we know there's so few people, and yet they have to share bunks. You know, so there is there's a need for space for other stuff.
Well, we did see where Ash's quarters were. It's in the inner ring. In the last episode, they go it through his window.
That's interesting.
And it's the inner ring. The bridge is almost like right behind his quarters. So, yeah, I can see that being the bunk space in the living quarters, that central ring. And then we've seen Tilly and Burnham running along one of the corridors that attaches the two rings. That could be more of science labs and stuff out near the edges. So,
and then the engineering stuff's at the bottom below the rest of the ship.
Yeah.
But again, this cuts off the nacelles and looks better proportioned instantly.
Yeah.
What do you think about those under shuttle bay lights? Because there's a lot of lighting in this ship given the era. Because there should be almost no lighting on these ships. I mean, I approve. I just wish it was a bit more prime linking.
I don't have a problem with the lights there. I think they look good. I wish they would have looked a lot more like the lights underneath the shuttle bay of the Constitution class. The green, the red, and the yellow, kind of in that configuration. That would have been neat, a neat little tie-in.
Or in the middle of those two lights. Have those lights.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they're like shield grids, or... I mean, because that shuttle bay is such an important part. We see how often they send shuttles. We see... You know, there's got a big shuttle bay for a reason, so you need double shielding, because that shuttle bay is bigger than any shuttle bay that we ever see. Apart from the Enterprise D, but the Enterprise D is a huge ship, and its shuttle bay is the entire ring of the. You know, it's a pretty huge bay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So tune in next week. Same Trekyards time, same Trekyards channel. See you then.
I think you'll love it, and we'll love it, and we'll love you loving it, and see you then. That's it. Bye, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bye.